what will yesterday's election results mean for Arlington? We're fortunate as we go through that as a community to be joined by four officials from the local parties, and you see them here to my left, one each from the Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, and Green parties. To set the stage for our conversation tonight, a couple of figures. Preliminary data show that over 121,000 votes were cast in Arlington yesterday, or during the entire election. That's a record turnout here. Locally, it was a good election for the Democratic Party. The nominees performed well, with Hillary Clinton, Don Beyer, and Libby Garvey each winning more than 70% of their respective votes in Arlington. Similarly, in that vein, though, positions taken by the Democrats on the 6 referendum questions we had all won at least 62% of the vote. I will note here that some of those positions were not unique to the Democratic Party. They were shared by others. And the 2 Democratic school board endorsees ran unopposed for the 2 seats that were open this year. Now, Arlington is not all of Virginia, and it is not all of America. While Hillary Clinton won over 75% of Arlington's vote, she did win the Commonwealth, but with just under 50% of the vote. By contrast, President-elect Trump won 45% of the vote in Virginia, but about 1 in 6 votes, 16.6%, here in Arlington. Our county was more representative of the whole Commonwealth when it came to third-party candidates. Libertarian Gary Johnson won about 3%, and Green Party candidate Jill Stein won about 0.75%, both in Arlington and across Virginia. So what do these results mean for Arlington? How will we interact with the new administration? And what is the path forward for our local parties in the new national context and in preparation for next year's statewide elections in 2017. Let me introduce our speakers we have up here. Immediately to my left is Jim Presswood, the chair of the Arlington County Republican Committee. To Jim's left is Mark Antell, a representative of the Arlington Green Party, who is described by a colleague as, quote, an Arlington Green and longtime civic activist. To Mark's left is Kit Malinowski, the chair of the Arlington County Democratic Committee. And then at the far end of the table is Dave Valente, the vice chair, an 8th Congressional District chair for the Libertarian Party of Northern Virginia. And now to begin, and I guess we can start with Jim and work our way down. He's like, I sat next to him. First question, with an eye to both the national and the local races, what are your top takeaways from yesterday and what they mean for your party? Where do you feel you were successful? And what do you think is likely to have to change?
So, as far as what it means for here in Arlington, I think that's yet to be determined. But one thing that kind of struck me is just leading up to the election is that we really do have 2 different Americas. I'm from East Tennessee. Knoxville is where I grew up, and going home, I would see Trump signs everywhere, and it was all Trump territory. And my parents would talk about the election, and just very clear where sort of the general sentiment was. But then I come back to Arlington inside my little bubble, and things were different. People looked at the world a bit differently. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how our political parties handle that. Obviously, the Republicans here in Arlington, President-elect Trump, he ran against the establishment, and we're ground zero for the establishment. So obviously there was some tension and angst amongst our Republicans, but I think ultimately we found out that it's a different day with the populist taking over as the president-elect, and he's not a traditional conservative. And I'm a traditional conservative. Most of others in the committee are, so I think it's going to be interesting.
I'm Mark Antell with the Green Party, member of the Green Party in quite a while. Throughout this nomination and election spectacle, Mr. Trump presented himself as the anti-establishment character. I think he tapped into a broad stream of dissatisfaction running throughout America. There's a sense that things are not going well. There's a sense that insiders pretty much that government is directed and run for them. And I think there's a lot of truth in that perspective. The way that plays out in Arlington is that land use decisions are made generally for the benefit of developers, and specifically the very large companies that own most of the prime commercial land in Arlington. One personal example that hits me right where I live is the disposal of the land parcel that contains Wilson School and the Rosslyn Highlands Park for a little bit longer. It's absolutely a wonderful location for play fields and play space and there is no other, for our most urban neighborhood in Arlington. Despite calls from the Civic Federation and the HALRB, which is Historic Architecture and Landmark Review Board, recommendations that green space, that opportunity for children to play, that it be maintained. It won't be. It will largely be developed. County Board calls this a hard decision after robust discussion, but those statements are not true. Ask any of the civic leaders in Rosslyn. If you ask Stan Carson or you ask Dennis Garrity, who's one of the civic associations nearby, Paul Derby, my own North Rosslyn Civic Association, they'll all say that the decisions were anti-people and that the deals were fixed long before public input were sought. That's the problem that we see in Arlington, that the Green Party certainly sees in Arlington. And I don't see that much is going to change until that changes, and we'll hopefully be able to talk about what it takes to make that happen later in this roundtable.
So the key takeaways from yesterday's election, there's so many. First, if you saw Secretary Clinton's wonderful remarks this morning, she really spoke with grace about wanting President-elect Trump to succeed. And as the president echoed, that we want all, we're all on the same team now. We want the country to succeed. And just as President George W. Bush left that note for President Obama that he wished that he would succeed. I think that's important. So that is the first thing that I want to say, is that we are patriotic and we want to see the President of the United States be successful. But on the other side, I am very concerned, very, very, very concerned. I've been teaching middle school students for 12 years. My principal sent out an email to all staff about concerns about bullying, concerns about treatment of students who may look different from most of the students in a particular school. And I also watched this morning our county board members, all 5, remark on this election, and they had some incredibly thoughtful, wonderful remarks about the impact in Arlington. And Katie Crystal leading the way by talking about the inclusion and the welcoming nature that has been Arlington's tradition, and worrying about that going forward, but making sure that we do all we can in Arlington to be welcoming for people from all walks of life. And what it means for the party overall is that while the turnout was near record-breaking and was record-breaking in absolute numbers from yesterday, if we look around the country, what is true of Arlington is not true elsewhere. That there were a lot of Americans that did not vote, and that's making a choice, and that's making a statement. And I think there just needs to be so much more work done to get that out. And the final thing that I just would say that concerns me is that there were so few issues, I think, or time spent on the substantive issues where I think there were so many distractions that got so much coverage that I find that very dismaying. But to me, it's, as I told my students today, just be a better citizen. Be a better citizen. Write a letter to your member of Congress. If someone disagrees with you, seek to understand their position, not to insult them. Let's move forward together.
Yes, we're the Libertarian Party. We got 3% in the vote yesterday. That's the 3% that we haven't gotten an election before, a national election. So that's one of the big takeaways for us. We got 3%. We didn't get the 5% to get major party status. I'm sorry. Okay. We didn't get the 5% to get major party status, but we did secure ballot access in several states. We had it in about 24 states normally, but we added Connecticut, D.C., Iowa, Kentucky, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma, we had to get 50,000 signatures to get on the ballot. That is a lot of work, a lot of money. And that time and effort takes away from us being able to actually campaign, raise money for our candidate, and get out in the community. I mean, we are in the community getting the signatures, but really it's just, hey, sign our petition, please get us on the ballot. You don't have to vote for us, just get us on the ballot. So nationally, I think everybody here is kind of in a state of shock. Even the people who support Trump are in a state of shock of what happened yesterday. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were posting last night the meme of Eddie Murphy saying he blanking won. You know, yeah, that was a shock to everybody, and I think this is a major shift election. We're seeing a large shift in the base of our parties. So what it's going to mean for the future is whoever identifies what their new base is going to take advantage, and they're going to be a dominant party here for the next few years. Will the Democrats recognize that the pro-business Republicans are coming over? Will the Liberty Republicans kind of see no cause in staying with the Republican Party? Will the Republicans accept union members? I mean, that's the thing. And what we saw last night with like Wisconsin, you know, nobody saw Wisconsin going red. We saw it turn red. But if you paid attention to the signs over the last few years, Scott Walker winning, beating a recall, gutting the unions, the signs were there. But where you lost in Wisconsin as Democrats, you're starting to gain in places like here and in Virginia. And my time's up, but I'll just say that we're excited for the future. It wasn't what we wanted, but we're excited.
As we discussed, only one voter in 6 in Arlington voted for President-elect Trump. Jim made a reference to being in the bubble here. But we do face this new reality. How do you see our county faring with the new administration? And early thoughts about how we position ourselves for success over the next 4 years as a community. Maybe we'll start with Dave and work our way back.
Okay, actually, I think really when you think about it, it's going to be status quo. I know that a lot was made that Trump is someone that's not going to get us into, increase our foreign entanglements. I don't see that. I think he's going to go along with what's been going on the last few years. We're going to stay involved in a lot of foreign entanglements, and I'm sure the folks down in Crystal City where I live are pretty happy about that. That's going to keep them in money. You may see, if you see a Scott Walker join the administration, you might see a big fight with the unions, which will impact the community. But I think, as we've seen with the Bush administration, with the Obama administration, no matter who's in power, it continues to grow. And that's why we're in a bubble, is that the government continues to grow, and we don't experience some of the hardships that are going on in the greater United States, what they call the flyover country. And I think that's something that we're going to have to really take a look at, take some notes on, or we're going to see even further division and further hostility towards what goes on here. And as a federal worker myself, people say libertarian federal worker. I am the real life Ron Swanson. I'm glad some of you got the reference. Nothing makes me more of a libertarian than working for the federal government. Some of the frustrations that go on there. So you've got to be able to identify what's going on in the rest of the country and take that to heart, because we did get a big message last night.
Well, I certainly hope the policy implications for Arlington aren't dramatic. But I think Trump has bragged about being unpredictable. and I believe him. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't think he's sure what's going to happen. For from D.C. on out. But some of his policies could have a drastic effect on Arlington. And what I mean by that is that in Crystal City, we saw actually, we have a high office vacancy rate there. We've had areas where have been hit by lots of office space and jobs. But our Governor McAuliffe, has helped partner with different tech firms, with companies around the world, bringing jobs right here into Arlington and creating those jobs. And like the company 1776 and others, that they've opened these jobs, and they have been anchors for communities and neighborhoods in Arlington. But I think that with a President Trump, now he says that he's the best at deals, that he's the best deal maker. And gosh, I hope that's true. I don't believe it, but I mean, for the sake of our country, I hope he can make good deals. But I think that if he follows through on his policies of saying there's going to be extreme vetting, or Muslims are not allowed in our country, or we are going to build the wall and have this deportation task force, if that's going to happen, I'm not sure there's going to be other countries that are going to look to locate their companies here. They're different companies may say, let's go find somewhere safer than the United States to put our to put our new company or our new business, because there may not be any stability here, and we can't predict what that president's going to do next. So I'm really worried about it. Now, I hope for the sake of the country that things go well, but I think it could run the gamut from anything from very minimal impact to a very, very significant impact on Arlington, and I hope it's minimal.
I'm not sure that we know how to position ourselves for a Trump administration. I think that in all likelihood we'll see a little less federal involvement in trying to build up communities, particularly like ours. But that's just a guess. So I think that we're going to be largely, a little more maybe, even on our own, and we should be thinking about fixing our own house, and really backing off on many of the poor decisions that and poor decision-making process that we've had over the last 10, 15 years, as long as I've been in Arlington, 20 years, certainly 15 years. We should be demanding more transparency in our local government. We should approach the statements of our local government with a little less credulousness. As a couple of examples, we've seen a silver line, a lot of emphasis on expanding the metro, and in the midst of really a sign-off and a waiver of fundamental maintenance. And Arlington was very much a part of that, as one of the, holding the chairmanship of the WMATA a couple of times during the period of the worst maintenance. Instead, again, the emphasis was on building a silver line. It probably was good for some certain landholders out in Fairfax, but it wasn't so good for the citizens. I think that when well-entrenched community leaders celebrate all that we've spent on construction of affordable housing, we should be questioning that. Over the last 15 years, we used to have 20,000 market affordable units. We're down to just a few thousand. In the meantime, we have spent a lot of money in replacing about 3,000, adding about 3,000 committed affordable units. So the overall loss over 20 years, 15 years, has been well over half of our affordable housing. And to some degree, I talked about credulousness. The Committee of 100 is asked to endorse something about an affordable housing authority here in Arlington, and you all declined to do that when that was on the ballot. So I'd ask you to examine yourselves as well, as in terms of solutions, problems and solutions. Thanks.
As far as what's going to happen with Arlington when the Trump administration takes over, I think each administration we have, there's a lot of change. I mean, people coming in with a new administration, get a lot of new folks in the area. As far as specific impacts, I'm not really sure, but It is kind of interesting, comparison that we have for the Trump administration, what's going to happen. I think people have been saying, well, this is historic. We haven't seen this most stunning upset in over 100 years. Well, one previous upset, or just sort of a dramatic turn of events, was when Andrew Jackson took over as president way back in the 1800s. A fellow Tennessean, and he came in and was the founder of the Democratic Party. But people didn't know what to make of this guy. They basically overran the White House with all these people coming in, and I was reading that they actually tried to punch outside to get people out of the house. So it was really kind of a raucous scene. So hopefully it won't be the. I don't think it will be. I mean, Trump is. He's obviously said he wants to drain the swamp. He wants to do what he can to knock out the special interest influence. And so we'll see how that translates and how his cabinet is put together. But I think as far as concerns, Kip talked about concerns that we have with the Trump administration. I think what we have in rural America and the industrial heartland are people who are very concerned. They're without jobs right now. They're in sort of the disaffected class, if you will. And I think it's kind of a global phenomenon with Brexit happening, and there's been a lot of benefits from globalization with people at the lowest, the poorest around the world kind of benefiting, India and other places. But what that's left is the working class, whites and others, who have not been able to take advantage of that economy. And so it's going to be interesting to see with Trump coming in with a mandate to address that kind of an issue, what he does with that. And I think as leading superpower, an industrialized economy, addressing that issue, I think is going to be very helpful. So it's really focused our country's attention on it. So I actually kind of look at this as an opportunity, even though it may seem dim and dark here in our bubble. I do think that there is an opportunity here to look at how our economy can readjust itself to take, to address the issues of automation, how that's taken jobs away, and manufacturing going on overseas. Those are tough issues that we need to address as a country to maintain our competitiveness. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how the Trump administration deals with that.
We're going to have a Republican president, yet as we discussed, only 17% of Arlingtonians voted for him, which is down from 27 to 34% for GOP candidates in the 4 prior elections. What is the path forward for Arlington Republicans to regain the support that the party did lose this year?
Well, I think that really is kind of an aberration, very much candidate-driven. I was looking at the previous elections, both congressional and presidential, and I think structurally we're kind of at the same place where we have been. If we had a traditional Republican candidate, I would imagine we'd have seen similar percentages. So I think with him running against the establishment, sort of against the elites, I mean, us in New York, kind of East Coast, we're kind of at ground zero for the elites. So he ran against us. So I think that is kind of reflected in the votes you saw. So I don't think it's so much a matter of rebuilding. I think it's a matter of really, who the candidate is. And as far as our longer-term thinking, what we're about is trying to introduce people in Arlington to, we are the party of Lincoln. And Lincoln was a very impactful leader and, led to a lot of great positive change. And I think our values are very much still in line with that. And it was very encouraging yesterday. I was standing outside of Barrett Elementary School, not too far from where I live, and I think I see Charles, my chief of my precinct over there at Jefferson. That's where I live. But anyway, outside of Barrett, just visiting our volunteers. And I was out there standing with a Bangladeshi fellow, middle-aged, and he told me had his Trump sign. He was hanging out over Interstate 66, waving that to passersby. And he and his nephew were standing out in front of the Barrett Elementary School. And his nephew worked at the 7-Eleven and could barely speak English. And he was just very passionate, eloquent. He was telling people why they should vote for Trump. And then as we were standing there, a Colombian millennial came up. And he's not a citizen of the United States. And he says, yes, I want to help you guys out too. So there was me, 2 Bangladeshis, and a Colombian national advocating for Trump, which is, I thought, quite fascinating myself. And then when we had in Clarendon Day, our booth, and it was a very interesting experience with everyone walking by. What is going on with you guys flying Trump flags in Arlington? We were approached by a sort of a local business owner, obviously not from this country, saying, "Yes, don't tell him I'm for Trump." So I think it's interesting that he brought in just sort of this whole sort of different element into the Republican Party, and I am very encouraged to see that. I would like to, as we move forward, kind of reconnect a little bit more on conservative values and see how that translates into good solutions. It'd be interesting to see what Trump actually does with some of these sort of meta messages that he has. But I think that there's a great opportunity, and I'm very encouraged to see this kind of a change in dynamic added to our party.
Now, turn to Kip next, sort of the inverse question. Democratic Party, overwhelming victories here yesterday, but the loss at the top of the ticket nationally. How does the party, especially after 8 years of President Obama, go from now sort of being all on end-to-end to continued local dominance, but being out of power across the river?
Every crisis is an opportunity. So we are. First of all, we got just starting with once the news broke about Trump's election. We got several, maybe a dozen volunteer requests. People saying, "You know what? I just posted on Facebook, but I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to be involved. This is." I can't believe that this has happened. So I'm going to get more involved in my community. I want to find out how maybe I could become a precinct captain, or I can do something to help elect Democrats. So that is going to be one big way, is just to recruit volunteers, continuing our outreach effort. But we in some ways for organizing political parties, it's actually easier to be out of power than in power. Oftentimes, when you have a long record to defend, even if that record is actually, as I believe President Obama's is historic and is accomplished, and apparently 54% of Americans agree. But still, there's a lot to defend, and there are. As Jim mentioned, those pockets, and not pockets, but large swaths of the country that do feel left behind. And I wish the Republicans in Congress would have responded to President Obama's $450 billion American Jobs Act that he proposed 5 years ago, that would have helped so many of those communities that are struggling. But they put their short-term political interests first. But now we're at the national level in the opposition. And it's up to Trump and the Republicans in Congress to govern. We'll see how that goes. If they do it well, then good for the country and good for the world. If they do it poorly, Arlington is going to punch above its weight, helping out Democrats all across the Commonwealth and maybe even beyond, to organize great parties, to do great voter registration drives like the one we did here, to make sure voters are informed of and have plans to vote, and to make sure that they're given those clear reasons to get out there and vote, so that we make sure people are always informed of the stakes of the election and are prepared to cast their ballot.
Libertarian Party has been a player in the last 3 statewide elections, with Sarvis twice and Johnson yesterday, but has only once cracked 5%, never above 10. How does the Libertarian Party build itself into a major player in Virginia and also in Arlington, where I don't think you've competed locally?
3 things: ballot access, ballot access, ballot access. And it's really perverse in this state, the things that we have to do to get ballot access as a third party. Next year we're going to try and run a governor and a lieutenant governor and a AG candidate, and to do that we'll have to have 10,000 valid ballot signatures, 200 per congressional district. So you're talking about 30,000 for those 3 statewide offices, and the 200 per congressional district, so 600 per congressional district. That's a lot of work. We actually reduced the amount of ballot signatures you need to do for the president. We only had to do 5,000. We were able to do that fairly easily this year with Gary. The vote total, it's a lot of it is it's exposure. One of the things the last gubernatorial election with McAuliffe, Robert Sarvis was polling 10% before the debates, which was the threshold that they gave us, and he was excluded still. And what we do when we do that with those debates, and when we also talk about with the national debates, you exclude those voices. What we saw with the national presidential debates, we didn't get policy debates. We got character assassinations. That's all those debates were. There was no substance to those debates. I don't know that you could pull out a policy. The most substantive policy debate was the vice presidential debate. And that's wrong. I mean, it's entertaining, it's entertainment, but we're trying to inform the voters on policy positions, and you're not doing that by character assassination. I'm sorry. So getting in the debates is another key issue for us. If we could have gotten Robert into the gubernatorial debate, we'd have had much larger impact. We're talking about things that both major parties don't talk about. We're talking about shrinking the size and scope of government, reducing the amount of regulations, increasing the sharing economy. These are things that we really are passionate about. Ending the drug war, removing us from being the world's largest incarcerator of our own citizens. We can't have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. That's no longer sustainable. We can't sustain a $19 trillion debt. These are things that weren't talked about in the presidential debates. These aren't talked about in any debates right now. So these are things that, get us in. Let us get in the debates. Let us petition. Reduce our burdens to petition. Get us better ballot access, and you'll see the Libertarian Party grow much larger.
The Green Party, fair or not, has a gadfly reputation for raising environmental concerns and perhaps being a resting place for liberals who find the Democratic Party too conservative or insufficiently pure, but has not had much electoral success in the United States, has in other countries. What do you see as the optimal role for the Green Party, and it could be the one that I just laid out or other, and how do you see the party getting to it?
I guess that, I'm truly not sure. I'm continue to be surprised that with the levels of dissatisfaction in the major party candidates that we as a country experienced during this election, that still the large majority of people went ahead and, maybe holding their noses, went and voted for one candidate or another. I'm not sure how to break that. Some of the things that Dave was saying make a lot of sense. I will say that we saw one, from my point of view and our point of view as the Green Party, we saw one bright spot. There were initiative drives which allow citizens to break the stranglehold that the insiders have got on the political process. There were initiatives that really kind of that markedly changed the story, at least as regards the legalization of marijuana. That may be a step towards ending the drug war, and wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? I'm kind of hopeful that the Green Party will get more engaged with initiatives. We have in the past. We sponsored a couple of initiatives here in this county to create a housing authority, as I mentioned. It's a great tool, but it's pretty limited, your ability to do much in Virginia. In many other states, it's better. I guess that the Green Party is okay with the notion of just continuing to support candidates that call mostly for transparency. That would be probably the main thing that we see as the failure in the Arlington polity, is a lack of transparency in how decisions are arrived at.
And I'm a former federal government employee. In the past couple of years, the Republicans have led the way to diminish the benefits that the employees have earned over the past decades, and in spite of there being a Democratic president. However, I am afraid it's going to get worse for us now, not just the retirees, but also the employees who are earning benefits. We are no better off than our people in the private sector, but I'm afraid we are the only group of people in the United States who have been targeted for such diminishing
good
benefits.
question.
What do you think about that?
So Charles Hernick, our Republican nominee for Congress, I thought had some really interesting things to say about government workers. Obviously, the federal government agencies do important work. I think sort of from a global perspective, there is within the Republican Party, of course, an interest in trying to make government run efficiently. So, I mean, some have said, well, we need to eliminate certain agencies and all that. But when it comes down to it, I don't think that that's the real gist of it. I think you would find that most Republicans are they just want to see government run well. And Frank Wolf, former representative of the 10th district, congressional district, was a huge advocate for federal workers and trying to find ways that work. I think, but really we do have to kind of wrestle with how large and how impactful is our government. And when I hear stories about the inability to get rid of the dead weight, when people have the ability to kind of basically stay in a position for and doing terrible things, I think that's an unfortunate situation. Now, as far as retirement plans and all that, I have to admit I am not an expert on that. I don't know, but we do have Republicans out there who are very committed to federal workers and seeing, like Frank, I think is a great example. So I would think Charles would have been too. He worked a lot with international aid and those USAID, and he wanted to see more performance rewarded, and I'm sure he would have some thoughts on the retirement plans, but I just don't know on that one.
The most disheartening prospect to me is the fact that Donald Trump has promised to appoint an ultra-conservative to the Supreme Court. And Kip, I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to make him a little more rational about this.
I'm afraid the short answer is no. But I don't want to stop there. When I first did an internship in the U.S. Senate, was in the year 2000, and saw the Bush tax cuts go through, and I thought those were a terrible idea at the time. And I wrote a letter to my congressman, knowing full well that my letter was not going to change his mind. But it didn't stop me from writing that letter. And I think that as citizens, when we have the issues like the Supreme Court that we are so, that is so important, can have such a dramatic impact on all of our lives, on such an enormous range of issues, I think we have a civic responsibility to write our senators, to make sure that they know we want them to do all they can to make sure that we get qualified, reasonable nominees with empathy for people who haven't come from privileged backgrounds their entire life. I think that's a powerful thing. So the key thing is, let me say, you can't promise what's going to happen, but we can't control that. What we can control is what we do. And what we can do is express our opinion. And then after we express our opinion and do that in writing, we can ask 5 more people to do that. And we keep doing that, taking that out. The few voices can change a room, and then maybe that room can be changed. But it's going to be tough. But we've got to do it. We've got to step up.
One of the things that you should keep in mind is that you do have 47 Democratic senators. So one of the things that can be used is the exact thing that they used with Merrick Garland. Also, this Supreme Court justice, if he is a rock-ribbed conservative, is replacing a rock-ribbed conservative. Now, you're probably going to want to put medical monitors on the 4 liberal justices for the balance of the 4 years, and 24-hour monitoring, make sure they're okay. If they sneeze, check them in the ER. But I think that this Supreme Court nominee is you're going to see status quo ante on the Supreme Court, back to when Scalia was on the bench. So.
All right. So the court was obviously one of the huge driving issues for a good segment of the Republican electorate, including myself. I mean, that was something I cared deeply about. Now, when I hear ultra-conservative, it's definitely in the pejorative sense, and I just I think it's going to be interesting to have a conversation about these kind of issues, especially in a place like Arlington. I mean, what does that mean? I think you'd be surprised at what conservatives really believe on jurisprudence and Supreme Court jurisprudence. Even Scalia, he was had more of the idea that with the Supreme Court, what we should be doing is following the Constitution, interpreting the Constitution as it's written, and not taking decisions out of the hands of the legislature. So this idea that the Constitution basically changes what it means as we progress through time. So you just kind of put your finger up to the winds and kind of, well, what does it mean now? That just strikes me as something we don't want to do. I don't think it's helpful for the institution itself. So when we have a conservative justice, I think the emphasis of that is going to be someone who will interpret the Constitution as it's written. Now, if we want to change the Constitution, there's a process for that. But I think it's just unfortunate that we take important issues that are hotly debated out of the hands of the legislature, and they're decided by 9 justices who have lifetime appointments. And that's what really scared Republicans, was that there would be generational changes with a court. I mean, you'd have a court that's set with, it was 5-4, and then it could potentially be like 6-3, Democrat, Republican justices, and that could stay the same ratio for generations. So that's very troubling when you have an institution that powerful, that locked in, and basically, I think that's something very concerning for folks. But I think that's an issue in Arlington that we really need to talk about, and try to figure out, is there some way to look at the court in a way that doesn't drive sort of this extreme polarization where we really even can't have conversations about it. I think that's something that's unfortunate, and we can work on as a polity. I guess somebody used that phrase, but anyway, that's my thoughts.
I appreciated the responses. Pretty much they're on target. It's disappointing that Mr. Obama's nomination was blocked of a pretty reasonable guy. So that's a shame.
At the highest level of abstraction, everybody believes that the president should represent all America, and that everything should be done to bring these two divisions of America together. What concrete steps could President Trump take that would have those effects?
Sort of my approach on this, and maybe this will lead to an answer that makes some sense, but I don't know. Before I became chairman of the Arlington GOP, Mark and I actually worked on an interesting, fun initiative trying to help protect our parks. And I live next to Thomas Jefferson Park, and we were trying to keep the school from being built on the east side of the park and turning green space into a school. We figured, there's smarter ways to do this. Why don't we try to build up, not out? And we were all in that, and we had people who were like in the schools community. They're basically saying, we have got to find more seats for our students, and we need to do what we need to do. And if that means building on a park, we build on a park. And you have parks advocates saying we really need to conserve green space, and we have a very limited amount of parkland to basically meet the needs of a growing county. So we had some tension there, and then we found ways, I think, to kind of resolve it. Not fully, obviously. There's still some issues, as Mark was talking about. But I think as the administration starts to deal with some of these issues, Trump was talking in sort of the meta language of what's of concern to a lot of Americans. But when you start to actually try to solve the problem, I think it's just a credit to the genius of our founders that we have a separation of powers. You have a Congress, an executive branch, and a judiciary. That we do need, more or less a supermajority to achieve the big things. And I think that in order to get big things done, which I think President-elect Trump has taken on the task of doing, you have to find ways to bring people together. And when he's talking about the art of deal making, that's part of it. So I think that we will see as he actually tries to execute some of this stuff, if he actually, I think he's sincere about trying to solve these problems, that he is going to have to be bringing people together. So maybe that will help, address some of this polarization we're seeing. But, I think, again, we're still we're still too close to the election to really know, I think. But we'll see.
I think the first thing that Trump needs to do is stop saying that he's going to lock up his opponent. He needs to stop threatening certain groups or saying that, well, maybe we should just deport everyone, or maybe just the criminals, if he would stop speculating and have a more clear plan about who he's hoping to deport and not threatening tens of millions rather than just millions. And with Muslims, with a number of my students, that they don't feel like there's going to be a travel ban put on them, or if they're going to go back to Turkey, or if they're going to go back to Morocco, that, no, there was terrorists in your country, so you won't be let back in here. Those are frightening things. And Trump has fanned the flames of that xenophobia. And so the first thing is stop. Stop doing that. If you want to be president of the United States, you've got to be president of every single American and not threaten entire groups of Americans. So that's the first thing. But then he could go so much further. With African Americans, he always says to the African American community that you're living in hell. You walk outside, you get shot. Well, that's not true. That's not true. It is a gross hyperbole. Most African Americans are middle class, and they're doing better than they were 8 years ago, and they're doing better than they were 16 years ago. He tends to stereotype large segments of the electorate. And worse is, however inflamed his rhetoric may be, that of his supporters is then unleashed sometimes 5-10 times fold. David French, a conservative who thought about running for president against Trump, to stop Trump, part of the Never Trump movement, he talked about trying to run, saying that he had gotten his kids threatened, that there had been people who had harassed him, that he feared for his safety, he had to call the police. I mean, this is not normal. This is not normal. And I wish President Trump would stop fanning flames of hate and would start doing more to reach out and build some type of bridges. He wants to physically build a lot of bridges, and I hope he does. We need a lot of infrastructure spending. Again, I said I wish it would have been done 5 years ago. There would be Democratic support for spending money on infrastructure. Let's do that. Let's do these things that we can do to, yes, help people in coal country, to, yes, help people in the Rust Belt. There's plenty of people that need to be put back to work there. But we don't need to do that by stigmatizing part of our fellow citizens. Thank you.
For more.
When I bought my house in '88, my real estate taxes were $2,000 a year. They're now close to $8,000 a year. Even with some degree of tax relief from the county, it is burdensome. I am concerned that on the election, the bond issues were for a lot of money. And even though we made progress this year in having them itemized, each out what each of the four things would cover, we did not have the ability to say out of those four things each one covered which ones we were for and which ones we were against. So if you didn't want a gondola over Rosslyn, but it was packaged with a Metro fund, you couldn't vote for one and not for the other.
Gail, your question?
My question is, with these bond issues and with our strained relationships with Richmond in the past, what does this election mean as far as our taxes go and our relationship with the powers to be in Richmond?
Your taxes are going up. I'm sorry. The Libertarian Room is going to point that one out. Your taxes are going to go up every time we vote for a bond issue. Definitely consider everything that goes in that bond issue. If they're stuffing in, good stuff and bad, don't be afraid to say sorry. Come back with the good stuff. If you don't want the gondola go over the river, don't vote for it, even if it comes with good stuff. Your legislators, your local people owe it to you to provide you with things that help the community, but they don't. But they shouldn't give you stuff that you don't need, and that's the reason why you see large unoccupied spaces in Arlington, is because we've raised the rents, and I'm going to say the rent's too dang high, but we've raised the rents here so much that we've driven the businesses out to Lorton, to Loudoun County, to Fairfax, and they're doing the same thing. They're raising taxes out there, and it's just they're moving progressively out because we keep building the metro tracks out there. So, you just got to be able to confront your legislators, you confront your local board members for putting things on the ballot that contain both good and bad things. Say, this gondola was not needed. Nobody needed it. But transportation infrastructure, I mean, anybody who drives the roads can realize that there are some issues with the infrastructure that we need to deal with.
The Arlington Green Party, in this election, it took no stand on the bonds, but in the previous election, we were against all of the bonds. Our position was that they were fuzzy. There was no real commitment to make the expenditures, that there was no obligation to go ahead and spend the money on what they said might happen if you supported these bonds. It was sort of like a TV program. This might happen if you support this bond. It wasn't this will happen if you support this bond. I think that the bond issues we should be looking at very carefully, and we shouldn't, as a community, simply vote for them in a robot sort of a fashion. There are real weaknesses in what gets bonded. It is interesting that the Columbia Pike trolley was never put on a bond issue. That the county board did creative things to keep it off the bond issue. I think we should be demanding of our elected representatives that things be bonded, and that bond be very clear that what it's going to pay for.
It may come as a surprise to some of you, at least, that we actually didn't oppose all the bonds. We supported Peter's bond, and thank you for your leadership on the schools bond. We thought it was really important to provide the resources needed to make sure that our students have access to high-quality education and the facilities they need. Metro, we oppose that one, not because we don't like Metro. We do support good public transportation, but that system is broken, and we need to get it fixed. So we wanted to send a message to that effect, and I think Richmond needs to be a part of that. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. I should say, usually when you fix something, you need to spend money to do that.
This is a local question about local issues. There are so many local issues we haven't discussed. They're talking about changing the zoning of schools. They're talking about regulating Airbnbs, what to do about affordable housing in my neighborhood of Westover. And yet, we had races where we had unopposed to basically two school board candidates, possibly write-ins, but basically unopposed, and we had a county board race where we had an incumbent independent who used to be in the Green Party, and that's it. So my question, especially for Jim, everybody except Kit, how can we attract qualified candidates for these very important local positions?
So we had a very qualified candidate in the name of John Weistat, who we endorsed. And he's a Republican who ran as an independent, and I thought he's done a lot of great work here in Arlington. Obviously, we are, I think, in kind of a rebuilding phase as far as Republicans. I mean, we had a good number of Republicans who were, county officials, elected state in Arlington, but the demographics have changed. So I think as we see, especially with the election of Trump, parties are becoming, people are not as moored to ideology as we originally supposed. So I think that gives an opportunity for some creativity to take another look at some things. And so you will see us running more candidates. I think that is going to come to an end as far as the unopposed thing. And then Republican candidates running against Democratic candidates. I mean, it's great to have independent candidates like John, but we want to see Republicans coming in and running for offices and applying conservative values to issues that matter to people here in Arlington. Because we have good solutions. And we're not about trying to polarize people or put people in boxes, but rather we're about well-run communities that provide good economic opportunities and building the economy. I mean, that's kind of what we are about, and we want to get that message out there. And having good, effective candidates run for these various offices, I think, is a great way to do that. So thank you for your question.
Well, that's what Mr. Sanders called for, the political revolution, which I took to mean that people should be putting themselves out, putting themselves in to putting their names in and running for office and getting engaged.
So yes, 2015 we had 17 of the state house of state senate seats go unopposed, 62 of the 100 delegate seats go unopposed. That's not sustainable. And that speaks to the gerrymandering that's going on in the state. We need electoral reform to include, independent commission or heck, a computer program that draws the lines of the boundaries for the state, so that people are put into their communities of interest, so that they can vote for their members, and it's more representative of who we are. That's one of the things we definitely need. Now, and we have not done a good job of this, I'll freely admit that. As libertarians, when there is an unopposed seat, we need to run somebody. Again, it's ballot access issues, it's the petition signatures. We need to make the effort and go and do that. I'm tired of seeing people, just by the mere fact that they submitted the paperwork, get elected to an office. There needs to be opposition. Even if we don't win, we're used to that. I mean, we need to give people a choice, though. We need to bring those issues that we believe in and get those issues addressed. Some of the great things that happen because we do run is that things like gay marriage have advanced. Marijuana legalization has advanced. These are things that we've been pushing since 1971 when this party was formed, and we're starting to see some of the fruits of those efforts with our Green partners and with the Democratic Party. So we do find areas of agreement, and these are definitely things that we need to work on and need to end, as far as polarization and things like that go. We need to find areas of agreement where we can work together on issues. And I know that the Democrats have issues we can work together on. We have issues we can work the Republicans on. It's just finding those issues and working together, and not working with somebody of another party like they've got the plague, So that's my hope.
I'll say that I teach civics to my middle school students, and I say that one of the fundamental roles of a party is that you got to choose candidates, and that means either nominating or going and recruiting candidates. But like in 2014, which was a crazy year with our 6 elections in Arlington, but one of those we organized in 6 days. We had 7 candidates come out, and we held a caucus, and over 2,000 people voted in it. So I mean, we try and really make sure that we recruit candidates. I'll say so in Arlington, I don't have to recruit candidates. Candidates come to me and they want to run. But I wish actually the Democratic Party outside of Arlington, especially Prince William and beyond, and Loudoun, would do a much better job of recruiting local candidates. I think actually that's one thing that would be a real important focus is candidate recruitment, because so many places don't have competitive elections, and that's a real shame if voters don't have a choice.